Okay, wonderful. Hi, Mr. Du Bois. This is Dr. Suresh Reddy. I am the president of National API. Thank you for joining us. In the interest of time, we'll keep the introductions short because it's everyone today here is a very special person for us. Thank you for joining, and I will briefly introduce all the speakers and moderators so that we can save time. We have Mr. George Miller, President and CEO from the Loretto Hospital, Mr. Brian Jepson, President, Central Ohio Market, Ohio Health, Columbus, Ohio, Mr. Brady Dubois, CEO, Lutheran Hospital and Lutheran Rehab Hospital, Fort Wayne, Indiana. We have Dr. Praveen Mehta, he's CMO for VA Great Lakes Healthcare System, Department of Veteran Affairs, Chicago. Dr. Indu Rao, Chief of Staff at Kettering Medical Center, Dayton, Ohio. And Dr. Rajesh Mohan, CMO, Monmouth Medical Center, New Jersey. And we have Dr. Sunny Bhatia, Regional CEO of California, Region 1, CMO, Prime Healthcare. And we have Saju George, Regional CEO of Michigan area, Region 5, Prime Healthcare. And I have organizers myself, Dr. Suresh Reddy, President of National API, and Seema Arora, Chair of Board of Trustees, and moderators, Dr. Ravi Jagirdar, past President of API, and Dr. Shashi Shah, past Chair API Board of Trustees. And panelists, we have Kavita Bhatia, Dr. Kavita Bhatia, CMO and Strategy Prime Healthcare, and Dr. Rupak Parikh, CEO, Advanced Rehab Center, and Dr. Prem Reddy, I will introduce at a later time. Ravi, it's yours. Dr. Jagirdar.
Yeah, hello everyone. This is Ravi Jagirdar. It's a pleasure for me to get to our first speaker. We will be, mindful of the time since we have a lot of them and we want to listen to all of them. Dr. Kiran Patel is known to most of us in API. He's an internationally known educationalist and a philanthropist. He currently is closely related and is on the boards of 2 medical colleges in USA, and he's starting one in Baroda, India. He has a long experience in extensive charitable clinical work in USA, Jamaica, Zambia, and in India. I cannot find a better authority to outline the educational part with reference to the COVID-19 pandemic. Without much ado, Dr. Kiran Patel, please go ahead and give us your experience and advice.
Thank you, Ravi. So initially, I want to talk in general terms of the COVID situation globally and in particular in United States. The challenge we are having beyond the disease itself is our country is quite polarized at this time. And instead of being united behind the country and the common good of every citizens, we are having challenges where there are 2 diagonally opposite views, and these are quite a challenge for an average citizen to be, because they are getting mixed messages which are diagonally opposite. And the other issue is in a new disease like this, where we have not adequate facts to make an authoritative decisions and statements are a challenge. And you can see that at one point, the death numbers were told to be around $1 to $2 million people dying in the United States. New York asking for 40,000 respirators, etc. And none of these things have panned out in the manner that was predicted by some. So I will not go further into these type of controversies. We'll try and address two areas of challenges that the society is facing. The first one being in education, and the second, if I may take liberty to talk about small business administration. And I'll try and stay way below my 10 minutes so that we can answer more questions and be more interactive than a monologue, which might bore some people beyond 3, 4, 5 minutes. So the resilience of this country can be seen as an example of how the university system has reacted. And I can talk in particular of Nova Southeastern University, where I'm intimately involved. The president first announced a 10 days break, and in that short 10 days, they were able to ensure that long distance learning can be put into action. And the response to that was over 12,000 students were daily attending classes on within that immediately after the 10 days. So you can see how resilient our community is, how creative we are, and how we can cope with some challenges. Of course, Nova Southeastern having several medical and paramedical courses, the experience of interaction with a patient, etc., will always be missed. And while telemedicine has become a good tool during this time, my fear is that some people may take advantage of it, especially because now you can be even paid for it. And secondly, the true spirit of medicine, the human interaction that was continuing because of the challenges of time pressures may significantly go down, and that will adversely impact our ability to diagnose and treat patients properly. So while it's a good option, I hope it does not become a replacement of what we can do. So as I mentioned, the university at Nova University, what we also did was ensure that students who were residing at the campus were given money back for the period of time they won't be here. So these are type of actions taken by the university to ensure that a student who is struggling with funding can utilize that money for the period of time they will be away from the university. So basically, the next phase is going to be quite a challenge, because how to ensure social distancing and execute learning. And for that, the plans are starting to occur where larger classroom size, classroom available will be utilized to accommodate fewer students so that the proper distancing and other precautions are taken. Again, I don't want to preempt somebody else's, but how much of this is effective, how much of this is really necessary, are all a big question. So there is a lot of controversy. Of course, the only model we have is the Swedish model versus majority of the world. But what I'm trying to say is we are in uncharted territory, and unfortunately, in today's day and age, what we never expected in a democratic country where the powers of the government are so far reaching, which can be seen as an example in Texas when a hairdresser went to a salon and ended up in a jail. This type of behavior was never anticipated and expected by a US citizen. So in variety of ways, we are experiencing totally different reactions that sometimes may not be absolutely necessary. The other part, if you think about it, the age group that is dying, and we have known the data of influenza deaths. So blaming everything to only corona as a primary cause and skewing the statistics could be an issue. So what happens is every person that presents the data may be biased by their own thinking and what they want to show. And I'm bringing these points up only to bring to the group that there are lots of discussions, and especially if people from API, the practicing physicians, take a very objective view and do things, then we might be a group of people that can really bring the data home and assist the future planning of what the path to be taken will be. The other portion I wanted to address is the small businesses that are impacted in such a negative way. And for example, restaurants, hotels, motels, and travel industry has been heavily. And when a question comes, I may address this a little bit more, but I want you to know that this is not a 6 to 8 weeks problem. The way we have handled it today, I think it's gonna be a 12 to 18 months problem. Now imagine a family that had brought in all their life savings and invested to start a restaurant or buy a motel, and was depending on the recurrent revenue to pay the mortgages and the debt service. Now, how will they survive? And this is important because there are a lot of psychological implications and challenges that the families will face, because it is very difficult for people like us who have some savings for the rainy day and have an ongoing income to appreciate how it is to be in a situation where you are totally wiped out and you have to start afresh all over again. So there is an economic aspect to it, which is a challenge. There is a medical aspect to it. And as I mentioned on education, the impact it would have in the doctors or nurses or other paramedical people that are going to produce in an environment like this, or in the window of this 4 to 6 months. How will they be treated? How will they be graduating, and what opportunities they are missing? These are all the factors that will come into play as we evolve and move into the next phase. I will pause here because I want to be respectful to other speakers, and I want to give people more chance to ask questions rather than a monologue from me. Thank you all. I will let the moderator bring in the second speaker if they want. Or if there are questions for me, I'll take that too.
I think Dr. Jagadhar is muted.
Can we, yeah. He's still muted. Ravi, you are muted. So I hope Vidya can unmute you.
Vijaya, can you please unmute Dr. Jagadhar?
Yeah, I'm trying to unmute him.
I think if you leave the panelists to have their own control, it would be good.
Okay, he's unmuted.
Hey, Kiran, thank you very much. You certainly gave an unusual insight, especially the education side, because that affects the doctors of the future, which is a big group in API. I would request Dr. Shashi Shah to come at this point and introduce the next speaker. Shashi, please go ahead.
He is also muted.
He's unmute.
Okay, now I'm unmuted.
Yeah.
Hi, Vijaya.
Yeah, he's online, Dr.
It's
Shah.
online. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a great honor and pleasure of introducing the most resourceful and most needed, sought after personality in the country. Mr. Michael Dolling, he's the CEO and President of the Northwell Health System. And he's on CNN, Fox News, CBC, CBS, NBC, and and local channels and newspapers everywhere. Let me tell you about him. He's an immigrant like many of us who worked on the shipyards, on the docks on New York Harbor. And he studied, went on to become Dean of the University, worked for 12 years in the New York State government, including Commissioner of the Social and Health Services. Then he joined as Vice President Blue Cross Blue Shield for a year. In 1995, he joined a hospital called North Shore Hospital, which was a small hospital. He saw the changing time and developed that hospital in a system which is called Northwell Health System. It's the largest non-profit system and the largest employer in the state of New York. Its annual revenue is $13.5 billion. It has 23 hospitals, 880 outpatient facilities, 220 private practices. Yes, 70,000 healthcare workers, including 13,000 physicians. They have a research institute, Feinstein, medical school, nursing school, PA schools. This is the epicenter of epicenter as far as virus is concerned. New York health system is the largest system, and being in Queens and Long Island, at one point we had 3,500 patients of coronavirus in ICU. You can imagine the burden. At present, we are using 15 to 25,000 N95 masks a day, 1.2 million gloves a day. Our patients, we discharged 10,137 patients, 37th patient today. It's a tremendous job. He was sought after by Governor Cuomo to coordinate these unprecedented time events. What he has done, he said, rather than when the patient got overloaded, like Forest Hospital in Queens, they should be transferred to another hospital. Not only in the same system, but transfer different systems, like one system to another system. Not only private hospitals, but also private hospitals plus the city hospitals, the state hospitals. He's a tremendous visionary. He has so many awards, but I'm proud to say that API honored him. API Charitable Foundation conferred him with a humanitarian award about, I think, 2002 or 2003. In this unprecedented time, when we have 2,500 patients right now, so far we have treated, we have touched 70,000 patients of COVID virus. Without much ado, I think I would like to present to you Michael Darling, President CEO of Northwell Health System. Michael, we would like you to tell us your experiences and please guide us what we should do future. I thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Darling.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sashi, and delighted to be on for a few minutes. And I want to, first of all, say for anybody that's on this call that has been participating in dealing with COVID patients over the past 2 months, I just want to say congratulations for all of the work that everybody has been doing and is still doing. I'll just give just a little update and then make some comments about going forward. As everybody knows, New York has been at the epicenter of this, and our health system has been in the epicenter of the epicenter. We have seen over 14,000 hospitalized patients with COVID and over 45,000 patients in total with COVID. That includes emergency room visits as well as ambulatory visits. We ended up having to create 200 new beds a day for a period of time. We actually created 2,000 extra beds in our health system to accommodate the volume. And I was also, as Sashi mentioned, I was also involved with coordinating the healthcare for the New York area beyond my health system. And also I was also involved with the running of the Javits Center, which many people may have heard of, and also of the Comfort ship that was delivered to us by the federal government. Today, we're in a much better position. The numbers are coming down. Today, we've got just about 1,150 patients with COVID in our hospitals today, so the numbers are dropping each day. And our anticipation is this will continue. And of course, we have to be very careful and worry about the possibility that it might increase again, especially in the fall. And I do believe that the coronavirus issue will be with us for quite a while. And the physicians, obviously, in the audience here that are listening in are very, very familiar with this. So a couple of comments, and a few other comments about the last couple of months, but it has been said a lot, and I don't need to belabor it, but what I have observed by being in the hospital almost every day is the remarkable heroism and courage by employees, physicians, nurses, etc. Now, but going forward, I think this experience, which none of us ever thought we would be in, there is not that many people alive that have been through a pandemic, so we have been experiencing something pretty extraordinary, and I believe we've come out of it pretty well, but we've all been changed by it. I think we've all been changed personally by it. I think it gets us to think about our role in society a little bit more, our relationship with other people, how we deal with friends and family, because it's not only the healthcare organizations that have been disrupted, every person's behavior has been interrupted. It's been basically has been an assault on the total way of life. The opportunities, however, going forward, I think there's a bright side to this, if you can even say those words, and that is that it gives us the opportunity to sit back and think about what we are going to do now. And it, as I said, it changes our perspective gets us to think differently. And it should, if we do it right, it should change how people work. Give you an example. I had 32,000 people working from home during this crisis. All of those used to always work in offices. My guess is that over the next number of months, we will have plans to have at least 50 to 60% of those people always work from home. The use of technology, we realized during this, was used more and more and more. Most of our meetings are always now like using Zoom. They're virtual. My senior staff has not gotten together for 6 or 7 weeks because we had senior staff who got the coronavirus, so all of our meetings are virtual. How we deliver care is going to change. Telemedicine has dramatically been accelerated during this crisis. A lot of the physicians I know that were always hesitant about using telemedicine, who didn't think it was appropriate, actually had to begin to use it during the crisis and now want to use it continuously. So I believe that there will be a dramatic escalation in what it is we can provide through telemedicine and the increased access that we can provide. Medical education, I believe we've got to rethink. Our medical school physicians, our medical school students were participating in the coronavirus issue. I think that it will make them better physicians. That's that experience they've had. But I do think medical education, just as was mentioned by the previous speaker, is going to be changed, as well as all education. You'll have a lot more online learning and a lot more online training. Another big issue is public health. The coronavirus clearly demonstrated the lack of the gap between people of color and white people with regard to access to care. So the whole area of social determinants of health and what we should be doing about that going forward is, I believe, a major issue. Companies, as the economy begins to reopen, and it hasn't begun in a major way in New York yet because of the severity of the crisis, but as companies reopen, all their behaviors will have to change. And if they don't provide PPE, or the protections and the social distancing, then I believe we could have an uptick in the virus again. But every business will have to operate differently. Some businesses probably will never open again. And the last point I'll just mention is, well, one or two other points. One is the regulatory issue. A lot of regulations, government regulations that many people find a little bit intrusive were relaxed during this crisis. And I do believe that many of them should stay relaxed, and we're making a major push to make sure that government doesn't go back to the old way of doing things. But it's also possible that government's role will increase as a result of this. That can be good, depending on what it is, or it can be bad. And the other thing I would hope, and the other speaker mentioned it, we suffer from extraordinary and, in my view, unnecessary partisanship. During the coronavirus, there was a lot of unity demonstrated. It didn't matter whether you were Republican or Democrat or conservative or liberal, black or white. The coronavirus affected all of us, and people came together. We saw this each and every day around all of our facilities, and that is true around the country as well. So maybe in the long run that we can use something like this to break down the barriers and break down some of the partisanship. I don't expect it to happen soon or quickly, especially not in the current political environment, but we should be using it. So in summary, I would say that we should be sitting back thinking about how has this crisis changed us personally? How has it changed our relationship with our friends and family and neighbors and co-workers? How is it going to change our business operations? How should we make sure it changes the way we deliver healthcare and what we focus on? How it changes medical education and should? How it changes how we learn? Our conferences like the one we're having right now, is that the future? Will we ever go back fully to in-person large meetings that are costly, expend a lot of money. I believe we'll go back to have some of them, but I don't know if we'll go back fully. So we should use this as a learning experience. As I said, it's not over, but it allows us all to sit back and have a new perspective on everything that we do. As I believe it has changed everybody, and I believe it will change every way we work in the future and how we go about our business. So those are just a couple of comments off the top of my head. I thank Sashi Shah for being such a good friend and a good leader in our health system. I've known Sashi for a long time. He's just a wonderful human being, and I'm delighted to participate. I have a discussion in a few minutes with the governor's people. So after I finish, I will have to get off because I have to deal with how to do testing among the minority communities in New York. We are expanding testing dramatically in New York, and I am being heavily involved in this, so I will have to leave you guys and go and have that other discussion. But I'm delighted to have been on for a few minutes, and I want to say thank you so much for the privilege of being with you.
Thank you, Michael. Michael, I really want to appreciate. I know how busy you are, and I'm sorry we had some time in connecting you. And thanks for taking the time out and coming, and I hope to get you again sometime.
Oh, I'm sure you will. You never miss an opportunity, Sashi.
Thanks so much, Michael. I appreciate your time. Thank you, Andy. Thank you so much again. I just want to say Michael Dowling is from RPQLI in our area, and Dr. Asbiani is the president, and we are going to have another session. I thank you so much. Next speaker, please. Hello, Ravi?
Yeah, thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Again, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Prem Reddy. Dr. Prem Reddy is a mentor and role model for not only me, for many budding physicians. Dr. Prem Reddy is the founder, president, and CEO of the Prime Healthcare, which is one of the nation's largest hospital systems with 45 hospitals in 14 states. Among numerous accolades, Prime Healthcare has been recognized as one of the top 10 health systems in the nation, and its hospitals have been recognized over 47 times among the top 100 hospitals in the nation by IBM Watson Health. Dr. Reddy is double board certified in internal medicine and cardiology. He has been named by Modern Healthcare as one of the 50 most influential physician executives in the national healthcare 9 times, and listed among the top 100 physicians leaders to know and top 100 most influential people in healthcare. Dr. Reddy also founded the Prime Healthcare Foundation, which has 15 hospitals, and recently led to the establishment of California University of Sciences and Medicine, one of the nation's newest medical schools. Dr. Prem Reddy. Yeah. Dr. Prem Reddy, you're on, Garu, you're on phone. Is he unmuted?
Yeah, he's on.
Speaker, Dr. Prem. वो मेरे ते कर रहे ना. I'm not the speaker.
Okay, looks like we have some difficulty with the transmission. Let me introduce Dr. Prem Reddy was supposed to introduce Dr. Sunny Bhatia and Saju George. Sunny Bhatia is an interventional cardiologist and is the CEO of the Prime Healthcare. Ravi, you want to give the question?
Yes, Dr. Bhatia, how would you lead the recovery as a CEO from the impact of a battered healthcare industry, and how would we regain the volume? Your comments.
Great. Thank you, Ravi. Good evening, everybody. The impact of the COVID pandemic has been far-reaching worldwide, and especially in the United States. Many industries have been adversely affected, especially the healthcare industry. Now, according to data last week, the US GDP contracted 4.8% in the first quarter. That's our first decline in 6 years. And the reduction in healthcare spending at an annualized rate of 18% was the biggest factor driving this decline. And we're predicting even worse numbers for the second quarter. So in order to determine the road to recovery, we have to really better understand what led to this dramatic decline and what issues do we need to simply address. So the elective surgeries were postponed. In mid-March, CMS, the US Surgeon General, American College of Surgeons, and many states issued guidance to postpone elective surgeries. Now, this has typically been the lifeline for hospitals, elective schedule volume, typically competitive payer mix, keeping our surgeons' practices viable, as well as hospitals. So the loss of elective surgeries has been quite impactful to the bottom line. We also saw a decline in clinic volume. Physicians stopped seeing all but the sickest patients in their offices. Patients were simply hesitant to come into the clinic and quite fearful of contracting COVID, whether it's in the clinic or in the hospital. What this led to was office staff losing their jobs or being furloughed. And now physician practices, the viability of them are threatened, and this even extends to ambulatory surgical centers. Now, interestingly, we also are seeing a decline in ER volume. ED volumes across the country are down about 40 to 50%. 30% of patients are putting off healthcare during COVID, either for simply being fearful or for financial reasons. Now, Cigna published some data recently, and this is actually very similar to our experience across the country, that patients seeking care for serious health needs have decreased significantly, which is really difficult to explain from a medical perspective. They looked at 7 conditions and found decreases in hospitalizations across the board. For example, 35% decrease in atrial fibrillation hospitalization, 30% decrease in TIAs, seizures by 28%, GI bleeding by 24%, aortic aneurysm dissection by 22%, appendicitis rates are down, acute coronary syndrome. So what this is pointing to is that the community and the patients are fearful to come in. They're neglecting serious signs and symptoms and medical conditions. It's leading to, I think, unrecognized and underestimated negative impact due to COVID. The non-COVID issues and illnesses are being undertreated, underrecognized, and we'll talk about some of the strategies our health system have put in place to overcome some of those challenges. And I think another area of focus and issues in the country is the rise in unemployment. The US economy lost 20.5 million jobs in April, and the unemployment rate is now 14.7%, so both record highs. Millions of Americans who lose their jobs undoubtedly will put off procedures. They may not be able to afford the patient responsibility, the co-pays, or they may no longer have insurance to allow for these procedures to be done. And what we're anticipating is a shift from commercial-based insurance or employer-based insurance to Affordable Care Act exchanges or Medicaid safety net programs. The reimbursement typically is less generous, and I think hospitals and physicians have to be wary of that and understand the nuances of it as they go forward. And then again, I think many of you have been reading about the CARES Act and the funding with it. At first glance, we're very pleased and very appreciative of what was been done. The CARES 1.0 Act allowed for $100 billion in funding, and 2.0 is allowing $75 billion. Now we're trying to clearly understand how the allocation will be, but simply that amount isn't enough. Latest estimates are showing that hospitals are losing a combined $50 billion per month. Revenue loss, as we already outlined, and rising costs, whether it's for PPE, supplies, labor costs. This is just simply not enough to meet the financial constraints brought on by COVID, and additional state and federal funding is needed for hospitals to survive. They were struggling before COVID, many community hospitals. Post-COVID, we anticipate even more challenges. So this is basically an opportunity, I think, for many of our societies, physician leaders, regulatory agencies to come together and ask for additional state and federal funding.
Thank you, Doctor.
Now, some of the strategies that we've implemented to address the consequences, we've always believed in value-based care. We define value as achieving optimal outcomes that matter to patients most in a cost-effective manner. So we believed in value-based pre-COVID, but I think post-COVID, this will be extremely important, now more important than ever. We implement lean principles, review and optimize all our expenses, contracts, our length of stay, utilization, and then also trying to foster strong community partnerships, especially in the post-acute setting, which will be very important dealing with the COVID patients in our hospitals and transitioning them to a safe place after their acute needs have been addressed. And then elective surgery. Now, many states have allowed elective surgeries to resume. This was some recommendations were made by the American Hospital Association, the Surgery Association, the anesthesiologists, nursing leadership, CMS, and each state to safely resume elective surgeries with the contingency that certain criteria are met. So we've now about half of our 45 hospitals have resumed surgery, but you have to do it in a very methodical, diligent, appropriate way. You have to ensure the safety of patients and your staff. You have to ensure adequate testing is available. I think this has been brought up already on this call, but that has been an area that I think was underappreciated and underestimated, the importance of testing and availability of testing and reliable testing. Adequate PPE to protect our staff and our providers. This has also been difficult in many markets. The N95, KN95, isolation gowns, gloves, sanitizing equipment, all of that, I think we didn't have enough supply to begin with. It seems like we're getting our feet under us now and getting better in that regard. But you really need adequate testing and PPE to resume surgery safely. And then in doing so, we have opportunities to prioritize cases and schedule appropriately, and we have advocated for a multidisciplinary committee to oversee the process at each hospital. And we provided each of our hospitals with a toolkit that includes a surgery policy that is in accordance with the state and county mandates, process mapping to help prepare sites in a sequential manner to resume surgeries, and an algorithm that provides guidance based on the patient's COVID status, procedure urgency, risk of the procedure, and appropriate PPE use and needs. We created an additional patient consent form so they understand the nuances of the COVID pandemic as it relates to their procedure. We also implemented a worksheet, the medically necessary time-sensitive MENTS worksheet, which helps hospitals prioritize medically necessary operations in the face of these resource constraints and increased risks posed by the pandemic. Also communicating to surgeons in the community and patients in the community that we're practicing all standard guideline-based precautions are in place to protect our patients and staff as much as possible. I think that level of reassurance is needed to overcome the fears that the communities have. It was mentioned briefly about telehealth. We were using telehealth even pre-COVID, but it's become even more important during the pandemic, and I believe afterwards. And I think we have a Q&A on telemed in a minute, but we've utilized it for our ambulatory medical groups, urgent cares, skilled nursing facility visits, acute inpatient care across a variety of specialties. We're also looking at revenue opportunities for outpatient practices. So for those physicians that lost significant revenue, utilizing telehealth in an appropriate manner, whether it be for in lieu of clinic visits, but also chronic care management, remote physiologic monitoring, transitional care management. These are opportunities for outpatient practices to maintain some level of volume during this pandemic. And then Ers Services, as I mentioned, we saw an inexplicable decline in ER volume. It's not just the lower acuity patients, the level 4s and 5s. There's serious risk patients that aren't coming in. So we need to go out to the communities and educate this at-risk patient population about what are the serious signs and symptoms that they shouldn't neglect and to ensure that they're properly seeking medical attention. We've implemented a tele-ER program in certain markets in the early stages of that. And then for our ERs and our hospitals in general, isolated COVID units, triage tents for the ER, and also dedicated armed wings and isolation units in the hospital. And then again, reassuring the community that we're doing everything that we can. All standard guideline-based precautions are in place to protect our patients as much as possible. And then also being prepared for the shift in payer mix. Again, what we're anticipating is many patients losing their employer-based insurance because of their employment status and their conversion to Medicaid and exchange products. So what hospitals now have to do is improve their utilization, revenue cycle processes, health plan contracting, expense reduction. And then finally, I think this is an opportunity for many of us to come together, American Hospital Association, the Federation of American Hospitals, the state medical societies, all our physician leaders across the country, to engage our lobbyists, our government officials, our agencies, to request additional funding from state and federal sources to really maintain needed operations for our physicians, for our clinics, for the hospitals. Access to good, high quality care is more important now than ever.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Radia, you have 30 seconds more if you like.
That's all I had, but I'm happy to take any questions.
No, thanks. We will keep the questions for later, but thank you so much. You obviously have a great grasp over the entire issues that are happening at this time. The next person I would like to ask a question to is Dr. Saju George. And the question is, Forbes magazine on March 17th classified CEOs as either fear-focused, unfocused, or strategy-focused, and all had their positive features. They noted CEOs that stood out for their calm, cool, and collective thinking, and the fact that they had also taken the earliest actions. The one feature which was common to them all was daily meditation. What do you think of that, and do you practice it yourself?
Dr. Ravi, thank you. Thank you for having me. As we know, Detroit continues to be an epicenter for COVID, and one of the prime hospitals is located within the red zone, and we had the opportunity to serve the community during this unprecedented time. As stated, to lead with calm, compassion, strength, and empathy with tireless focus towards the positive outcome is key for any crisis management. However, to lead and inspire others during crisis, we must earn their trust first. And to earn the trust, we have to meet the people where they are. And in a crisis, our most basic need is to feel safe. Our genuine compassion, teamwork, accountability, and ownership in doing everything humanly possible to keep people safe not only minimize the adverse effects, but instill a sense of no one left behind that helps to inspire and motivate people towards a common purpose. In our case, our common sense measures and logical rationale let us utilize the best available knowledge and resources at hand to navigate the challenge at any given time. And that strategy has earned the confidence and trust of our team. Now, the key strategy to lead in any crisis is to avoid denial and to anticipate what lies ahead and predict the contingencies. This requires detailed planning, as we know, and at times with plan B and the C as well to meet the demands based on the real-time corrections. And this has been a tremendous strength of Prime Healthcare during this crisis, both local and national teams coming together and collaborating, looking at the best practices around the globe and pulling resources together has tremendously helped our local hospitals. In addition, preparing for and to anticipate the aftershock or unintended consequences, as Dr. Bhatia just mentioned, is another key to success. And creating that infrastructure and crisis plan tailored to the situation is as essential. And in our case, we have initiated an emergency incident command both at the corporate level and local level. And we meet a few times a day and continually assess and reassess the situation and make changes based on situation that we were dealing on a day-to-day basis. The other key strategy is to communicate clearly and continually to all stakeholders and explaining the rationale behind the decisions. During crisis, that distinguishing between what is important and what is urgent is essential, and at the same time being flexible and innovative based on the situations that we face is also critical. And empowering others to lead around a common purpose is also important for success as we manage crisis. Finally, I would like to say, knowing what to do when we don't know what to do in a crisis has never been more profound. Our experiences from previous scenarios gives us some perspective, but also connecting with others and collaborating has been another key strategy for success in leading during a crisis.
Thank you, everybody. This is Dr. Suresh Reddy. I will briefly bring in Dr. Prem Reddy Garu. He'll come by and say hello. Dr. Prem Reddy.
Hello, Dr. Suresh Reddy. Could you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Oh, good. Thank you. I'm sorry I'm on the phone, not on the video. Congratulations for arranging this wonderful conference for all RP and for you as the president of RP. All I wanted to say was that I'm contributing 3 speakers today from Prime Healthcare. One is Dr. Bhatia. He's a cardiologist. You heard him. He's a CEO of Prime Healthcare's California and Nevada operations with about 17 hospitals. And you heard also from Sazu George, who is a CEO of a regional CEO of Detroit hospitals. So he was in the middle of the COVID crisis, which is an epicenter there. And then you will be hearing from my daughter. By the way, Dr. Bhatia is my son-in-law. And you'll be hearing from Dr. Kavita Reddy Bhatia, the pediatrician, and she is Chief Medical Officer of Strategy for Prime Healthcare, and also the chair of Prime Healthcare Foundation. And she will be moderating, as you know. I'm listening through, and I'm happy to share my people with RP coordinators. That's all I want to say. Thank you, and I'll be listening.
Thank you, sir. And Dr. Shashisha.
Hi, there's Dr. George Miller there. Dr. Miller, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes, I am.
Thank you for joining us. And we have, like, do you believe there will be a malpractice tsunami to follow because of this unprecedented situation? One scenario may be that now there is not much because nobody knew much about it. And if it is followed, what precautions can be taken to prevent it? Because there are telemedicine and so many things going on.
Well, first of all, thank you for allowing me to be here and participate in this outstanding panel. And I'm very honored to be with all of you today. I on Thursday participated on a call with the American Hospital Association led by the president, Rick Pollard. They believe there will be in works legislation to protect us all because of this unprecedented and unknown virus that happened less than probably 7 months ago when this first detected. The fact that it's overwhelmed the hospital system, if you look at the well over 1.4 million people infected, that the fact that this is new and we will run up close to 80,000 deaths, that I firmly believe that both the federal administration and each individual states will avoid having a tsunami of malpractice suits. Because quite frankly, if you kill the infrastructure with malpractice suits of healthcare in America through physicians like all of you, hospitals, hospital systems, the untold damage it would do, not to mention force many operations to bankruptcy would be untenable. So I don't think there will be. And in fact, one of the first things that was done here in Illinois is that the governor relaxed all pending regulations and gave us the opportunity to respond immediately by waiving some of the things that could lead to malpractice suits.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your input on that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for taking time out.
Sure.
And next is Dr. Brian Jepson. Are you there, Dr. Jepson? Dr. Jepson? Dr. Brian Jepson? Vijay, is Dr. Jepson there? In Ohio?
Yes, I think I'm. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you so much. I know you were in Rochester, New York, and then you were in Michigan, now there. Thank you for this tremendous experience you have. But our problem is, as you know, the morale is very low with new fear amongst the medical staff, leading to rising premature burnout. You know, and families are affected. Soldier can go and sacrifice his own life, but here you're putting life of your family at stake. And you being yourself a doctor, you know what I'm talking about. What steps have you found effective at your institution to counter this looming disaster?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think the most important thing that we've seen is just engaging the physicians throughout this pandemic, in particular around the back to business work. So as we get ready to start things back up here in Ohio, we've been very deliberate in how we have engaged our medical staff in that process. We've created multiple core teams for areas like surgery and procedural areas, imaging, and we have physicians represented on those teams, helping kind of make the decisions around how we move forward, and with testing, PPE, all those things. So I think it's physicians, the medical staff will be more resilient if they have a voice at the table, and our physicians have had a voice at the table. So they feel like they have some control over the situation, and that's helped. Also, we have a real emphasis on resiliency in our health system, not just with our physicians, but also with our associates. We have a physician resiliency committee that meets on a regular basis. They periodically survey the medical staff and try to really understand what the issues are so that they can develop programs to address those issues. So the programs like mindfulness, exercise, healthiness. One of the things that we all know is that if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't take care of our patients. And the other thing that we've done is been offering behavioral health support virtually for physicians, and it's done on a very confidential basis. But if they need to speak to somebody because they're having some issues, we provide that support free of charge for our physicians. And then lastly, I would say it's been continual messaging around the importance of resiliency for all of our team, everybody involved in our hospitals. This has been a very kind of taxing situation, and it's important that people are taking care of themselves. So we continually message. We've offered some services like concierge services, where we'll pick up groceries for physicians and for staff. We'll take laundry to the laundromat, those sorts of things. We also have done a lot around just trying to bring up morale, talk about our workforce as the heroes that they are. We've had T-shirts that we've distributed, this healthcare heroes, and just trying to keep everybody's spirits lifted through this challenging time. Those would be my comments on resilience.
Thank you, Jepson. It's not an easy task. Not an easy task to keep the morale of your workers ongoing. Thank you so much for taking the time out. I know how busy time it is for you at present. Thank you. And Suresh, I think Dr. Praveen Mehta is going to.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Dr. Mehta.
Okay, great. Thank you for inviting me on this call, Dr. Reddy. The next question I have is for Dr. Brady Dubois, who's the CEO of Lutheran Hospital and Lutheran Rehabilitation Hospital in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So there is a clarion call for retired physicians to return to the front line during this pandemic. And since the age would be a risk factor to themselves and the families, do you believe this is a good idea?
To be honest, I truly don't. I think that it's a time and place and how you utilize the resources. When you look at emeritus physicians or physicians with a lot of experience, instead of bringing them back into the front line and being boots on ground inside the hospital, this is where we start to leverage technology. We start to leverage their intellectual capital, whether it's EICU coverage, whether it's telemedicine for hospitalist rounds, whether it's supporting, the clinic patients while we use our younger clinic-based docs coming back into the hospital, so that they're able to do the e-visits and telemedicine visits with that panel of patients, working through opportunities from home, working through opportunities where they're more in a quarantine situation, and leveraging that technology to support others to be on the front lines. Because when you look at morale and you look at how things are very unique in today's times, if you lose an emeritus physician to COVID, it's devastating to your medical staff. If you use their intellectual capital and their expertise to treat others remotely, to treat others via telemedicine, to be a resource, use them as a mentor for those that, when you talk about resiliency, which I thought was a great topic on resiliency, this is where we can use our recently retired and our retired physicians to come back and use their prestige that they bring back to the medical staff, involve them in the meetings that you have, whether it's reopening plans, whether it's use of technology as you go forward. But if you can keep them home and keep them safe, but leverage that intellectual capital, I think you're going to be in a much better position than bringing them back onto the front lines where they are susceptible, where it provides a lot of anxiousness for the rest of the medical staff as they look at someone that they revere being in harm's way, where there are opportunities for them to stay at home. And so that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I would just wanted to add, at the Veteran Affairs where I am, we have done a similar strategy. We were able to get some physicians in critical care and ICU physicians from retirement, and they were able to really help with telemedicine because that was a tight resource in the ICU with the COVID. So that was really very helpful. So that expertise a lot of times is very hard to get. So we want to leverage all the expertise available, and using telemedicine is really a good way to do that. So thanks for sharing that.
Thank you, Dr. Praveen Mehta. This is Ravi Jagadar. I will call upon Dr. Indu Rao. And the question for Dr. Rao is, in these times, there is a universal call for sacrifices throughout the institution, not just the front line. That's medical and non-medical. So please tell us the accomplishments, the innovations and positive steps taken at your institution that you have been overlooked or which you would like to be aware of. Dr. Indira. Can you unmute Dr. Indira, please?
Hello, everyone. It is definitely a great privilege and honor to be a part of this excellent video conference. I work for Kettering Health Network, and the network encompasses 7 hospitals in the Dayton area. We're a community hospital. And the way we rose to the challenge, to this COVID challenge, was as an institution, we there was an institution of a 24/7 command center with really good inputs from all of the leadership, physician, nursing, as well as administrative leadership. And with this, our goal was to standardize care across all of the 7 hospitals. Pre-COVID, we were kind of functioning as silos. So in a way, COVID brought us together and standardized everything under one big umbrella. And the command center did a great job of rapidly instituting policies reflecting the constant turnover of information. And as we all said, you know, and the purpose of my was to sort of see what are the people, apart from the frontliners who had contributed to and rose to this challenge. Obviously, a big thing was the cancellation of elective surgery. So there was great participation from surgery leaders to determine what was essential surgery. This could have been a very hotbed of dissension, and the surgeons did a great job of coming together and really following through on what should be essential surgery. The command center did a great job of overall, you know, balancing with the supply chain. As every institution, we were also crippled with a low supply of PPE, and so had to balance that carefully with safety. We were ready for a surge if it were to occur. Our PCPs all were ready to come in if we had a surge. So I want to recognize that all of the doctors were actually, the medical staff was ready and poised for action should that be needed. Our medical staff office was ready and would have been able to get grant privileges within 24 hours if needed. I also wanted to sort of non-frontline people that participated in this were the environmental engineering department, which did a great job of designing screening locations in the hospital and areas of traffic to really, as a part of infection control, to make sure that COVID patients were clearly separated from the non-COVID patients. The environmental services were wiping high-touch areas several times a day to prevent transmission. As with every other place, there was a shortage of testing, and our lab did a great job of innovating, coming up with in-house testing, and even went as far as to manufacture nasopharyngeal swabs, which were in short supply. We had a centralized employee health that fielded questions from healthcare workers that were concerned about symptoms, whether they could come back to work, whether they could work. All of these questions were handled by our employee health in a centralized location. As other speakers before me have noted, communication was key. We discovered electronic communications and used Microsoft Teams, which some of us were never familiar with. And there was daily communication, daily briefings from the command center, daily briefings from the presidents of the hospitals, and weekly daily briefings from the chief of staff to all of the medical staff, and multiple levels. There were daily communication to alleviate fears and to keep people informed. I also want to credit MVAPI, our local physician association of Indian origin, that did a great job garnering social media effort to get volunteer for convalescent plasma donor when we needed it for one of our physicians. And this great effort made our area one of the first to use this treatment modality. The community, I want to talk a little bit about the community, the sacrifices the community made. There were volunteers who made cloth masks and donated it to the hospitals. And I would be remiss if I wouldn't mention our governor, who took the heat by making very early aggressive implementation of lockdown and social distancing, closing down many businesses. And obviously, although it helped us flatten our curve. There are a lot of businesses, unfortunately, who took a big hit. And as somebody mentioned, there's going to be some economic ramifications from that aspect. And last but not least, our spiritual services came in with their leadership and really addressed the fear amongst the medical staff, not only for themselves, but for their patients and for their families. And so our chief chaplain set up a prayer area for our healthcare workers and family members, sort of to provide a safe haven. Community donated food and other services for the less needy, other necessities. And so this made us feel that we all came together at this time of great crisis and really come together as a community. And so I would like to end by saying sometimes good things fall apart so better things could pull together. And so really, as we look forward, as we ramp up surgeries and open up the hospitals for patients to come, we'll have to just stay really guarded. We have to look at our processes, which we're refining. We have to be more cost effective. Maybe use more telemedicine to reach out to our patients in the community. And really communication. And we've learned that we can use information technology much more effectively than we did before. So that's what I had, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Rao. And Shashi, can you go ahead for the next speaker?
Yeah. Next is Dr. Rajesh Mohan. He's interventional cardiologist in Monmouth County, New Jersey. And Dr. Mohan, the question is, our physicians face multiple problems. One problem is, what advice would you give to employed physicians who are becoming insecure about unilateral changes to their contracts, including advanced pay cuts, arbitrary amendments, withholding quarterly bonuses, and even termination? And as you know, outside practice, those being affected, we would like to hear what your views are.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Rakesh.
Great, thank you. So that's a great question. And I think all the panelists so far who have mentioned right from the get-go, I think we've focused a lot. Before I say anything, I really want to actually thank all the physicians of Indian origin and other physicians throughout the country for doing such a heroic job over the past couple of months or so in very, very, very trying circumstances. And the results have been, we are the second worst hit in the state, in the country after New York. And we were at the epicenter, Lakewood, New Jersey, which is surrounded by retirement communities. And it is the second biggest yeshiva out of Israel, from what I know. And the community and the hospital staff, the hospital itself just came together in such a strong way that it was just an amazing experience. So with that, my always belief is that all physician practices, I mean, I know you talked about employees, and I'll just get that to in a little minute. All practices are essentially small businesses, and we underestimate physicians as poor businessmen. When, as diagnostic or interventional cardiologists, we used to make $2,000 for a diagnostic cath many years ago, versus $200 now. We still, I think, do pretty well. So from my perspective, I think the less we talk about money and more we talk about patients, I think that is where we will all be fine. Unfortunately, when we talk about money, we get branded in a different way, which is obviously not very complimentary. If the patient care is optimal, if we provide the best possible patient care that we can, the money will flow. And I do not want to sound overtly naive. I know you have to be financially viable. And I'm the Chief Medical Officer of Monmouth Medical Southern Campus, which is one of the acute care hospitals of the RWJ Barnabas system, which is the largest academic healthcare system in the state of New Jersey. and I run a multi-specialty private practice since about 15 years. So I see both sides, both the private practice as well as the business part of it. My motto has always been patient care first and money flows after that. And so far, thank God, it's been successful. There's a shortage of physicians. We all know there's a shortage of physicians in the country. There's a shortage of physicians throughout the world, and I think they will be well compensated. I saw ads of hospitalists and intensivists in the state of Michigan, $450 an hour, 600 plus time and a half. So I understand those are trying circumstances, and not every place is like that. But as long as I think we are not scared of taking patients, which I don't believe anybody in New Jersey or New York were, in fact, throughout the country as well. And we are not armchair physicians or WhatsApp and Facebook physicians. We're right there ready to take care of physicians. I think we'll be just fine. Patients still have heart disease. They still have cancer. They still have blood pressure and diabetes. So we have to start thinking out of the box. It cannot be business as usual. I'm sure it will not be business as usual. So we cannot forget those patients who are already, staying at home or getting their disease processes getting worse. We are gradually opening up at New Jersey, I'm sure other places as well. And folks who are sitting at home for some reason because they want to do elective surgery and that's their bread and butter, they will be back in business because there will be elective surgeries. But I do not think we should do elective surgery just because we want to make money. So it is all about patient care. So if you follow patient care, money will follow. It's simple things called, cardiac catheterization. There's new technology, FFRCT, which our center has been a pioneer in New Jersey, which obviates the use of diagnostic cardiac catheterization to a large extent. In Europe, it is a class 1 indication for managing heart disease. It is not a class 1 indication, and hopefully soon will be over here. And that is at less cost to the patient, and you get more disease, more identification and better management, as per all the studies that have been out there. There is very important, which we learned over the years that I've been in Lakewood, New Jersey, is you have to form a strong bond with the community, because that is the community that you serve, whether it is a local community, the retirement communities. We need to know what their ask is. We need to know our community so that we can actually serve them better in the right, appropriate manner that we need to always do. Things like, I remember, before COVID hit, C. diff was a major issue. Hand washing and all that stuff was a major issue. Leapfrog and CMS, they started having all these quality metrics. Nobody talks about hand washing everywhere. People wash their hands probably a gazillion times a day. There's barely any C. diff in the hospital. So I don't think we need to get caught up in just the COVID world. We have to deal with COVID. COVID is not going anywhere. At least we get either a vaccine, a cure, or what we do is antigen and combined antibody testing with contact tracing and isolation, which the third option, unfortunately, we're not capable of doing at this point in time. And we have to wait, so therefore, for either a vaccine or a cure. And unless and until that happens, it's not going anywhere. So we cannot forget the rest non-COVID patients, which we actually do have to deal with, and we have to take care of in a smart manner. So it cannot, like I said, it cannot be business as usual. It cannot always be money follow the patient or patient follow the money. It has to be purely patient care. And when you do patient care with, at the risk of sounding altruistic, I'm not, things will be fine. But you have to do it in a smart manner, in a very deliberate, intentional manner. I think one of the speakers from California earlier said, he outlined all the stuff that they are doing with different phases, which is what most hospitals are doing. But eventually, we cannot go back to what we were doing, because that system has, for the most part, failed us. And so we have to start thinking out of the box and make sure that we approach this in a smart manner and something which we can benefit all patients and not only just COVID patients. So with that, I know we'll have questions later on, and I'll be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Dr. Mehta. Dr. Mohan, that was excellent. The way you're dealing, but being CMO and on both sides of the equation is a great experience. And bottom line is patient care, be a doctor. Rest of the things will follow. Thank you so much. Dr. Prem Reddy.
Yeah, hi.
Mike is
So the next question I have is for Dr. Indu Rao. So this is about the recovery. So as you know, the measures taken in the United States to manage COVID-19, including restricting travel, shutting down non-essential businesses and elective care and social distancing, having a lot of economic consequences and leading to job losses and recession. So we're talking about the recovery. So there could be talk about different types of recovery from this recession. It could be a V-shaped, U-shaped, as in China, Japan, or Taiwan, or it could be a L-shaped, which is really a long, drawn-out recovery process. So what do you think the likely scenario here in the United States, and why?
2 minutes.
I think we're going to see a pretty big economic crisis following this. First of all, just as we open up, social distancing and all of that, as we open up businesses and healthcare and other things, I foresee that we're going to have spikes of COVID illness. Probably some states may have a second peak. Some states may have several such peaks, which is likely going to hurt our economy from that standpoint. Not only just not only healthcare, but also non-healthcare workers and businesses. So I think I don't think it's going to be one standard way that the economy is going to suffer in the entire country. I think there's going to be different states are going to have different ways that this is going to manifest itself. I think I'll stop here and see if there are any other questions or anything else that I need to follow up on.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. Yeah, certainly, I think, it's hard to predict at this point whether it's going to be a quick recovery or long drawn out. And I think from my perspective, a lot depends on the, how quickly we control the cases, how quickly we can get the testing ramped up, and of course the vaccination. So that's kind of the key things here. As we recover and we start services again, hopefully we won't see that resurgence of cases. So those are some of the factors, but thanks for sharing your ideas. So back to you, Dr. Reddy. Or Dr. Jahan.
Yeah, this is Ravi. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Praveen Mehta. The next is, I'd like to invite two more physicians. One is Dr. Rupak Parikh and Dr. Kavita Bhatia. There are some questions. There was one for Dr. Brian Jepson. I think he had to leave. But the first question will be for Dr. Kavita Bhatia, and it'll be for Dr. George Miller. Is Dr. Miller here? Oh, I just see Dr. Brian Jepson is back, so we can ask him the question. Dr. Kavita Bhatia, would you ask Dr. Brian Jepson the question?
Sure. Thank you, everyone, and it's an honor to be with you today. As shared, I serve as Chief Medical Officer of Prime Healthcare and Chair of our Foundation of Pediatrician. And I think our first question involves a discussion around where we see the impact of COVID and how healthcare can evolve in the next decade post-COVID. COVID has certainly created in the wake of an unprecedented global pandemic, has changed the way we deliver healthcare across the world. And it'll certainly lead to preparation for future viral threats, but it's also brought in remarkable collaboration, disruption, and innovation, which may continue to impact the future of healthcare. Specifically, I think collaboration between private and public sectors with agencies such as CMS, the FDA, FEMA, and HHS, collaboration between industry, government, the private sector. It's also brought in some significant disruption, such as telehealth and innovation. Innovation as it relates to treatment development, testing development, and telehealth as well. So I think our first question is, how do we see the evolution of healthcare impacted post-COVID? And I think that
Thank you again.
Mohan.
Yeah, thank you again for the opportunity to be a part of this meeting this evening. I just want to make it clear, I'm an administrator, I'm not a physician. For some reason that had me down as a doctor, so I just want to clarify that. So my answers are going to be probably more administrative related than clinically related. But I think it's a great question, and it's obviously we're going to change in many ways. A lot of those ways we've already talked about tonight. The first being the adoption of virtual health. I've seen articles where they're predicting a point where we're probably about a quarter of our visits will be done virtually. We've seen that just with our own practices at Ohio Health through the pandemic. Since March, we've done over 60,000 televisits. So as people were no longer comfortable going into the offices, we ramped up our telemedicine and our virtual medicine capabilities. And what we've seen is that patients really like that option. Patients are not comfortable going into settings where they feel like they're potentially sitting next to people that are contagious. And so I think we're just going to continue to see that ramp up over time and over the next decade. We talked a little bit about just changes in workforce deployment. A big change is, this what we're doing right now, this opportunity to connect with people virtually and working from home. And so we've seen that in some areas has been very effective. For instance, like revenue cycle that does our billing function and our scheduling. We've realized that we don't need to provide office space going forward for those folks. And our VP of revenue cycles decided that she's going to keep everybody at home going forward. So that's a significant expense to our health system that's going to be able to be avoided going forward. Also, decision-making has changed. It was mentioned earlier about the command structures that have been put in place at our health systems to manage this crisis and to make decisions quickly. And I think in a big system, we can get bogged down with the decision-making process administratively. You all have probably experienced that from time to time when you've approached the administrative teams about certain things that are on your mind, changes that you want to make. So we've learned to be more nimble through this and be more focused and make decisions quicker. So I think that's a really positive thing that's coming out of this and something that will continue. Supply chain has been a real eye-opener for our supply chain function. Just being able to source PPE for the pandemic has been very challenging. So we need a more resilient supply chain. I think we're going to need to look geographically where we're pulling our supplies. We need to understand what's going into making our supplies and who the middlemen are in the supply chain. So more redundancy and more reliable sources for supply chain is going to be really important going forward. And then just one final comment, because I know we're getting close to time. I think we're going to see more consolidation in the market. A lot of health systems are under extreme, every health system's under extreme financial pressure right now, and it looks like it's going to be prolonged financial pressure. And we don't know what it really looks like on the other side of this. Our patients, our patients going to have, the ability to pay for our services? Are we going to see an increase in charitable care? So those are, I think that's going to lead to some of the hospitals that are out in the more rural communities that are maybe potentially still standalone, have to think about who they might partner with going forward. So those are a few of my thoughts on how healthcare is going to be different as we move forward. And I think it was mentioned earlier that it's not going to be business as usual, and it's not going to be business as usual for a long time.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Mr. Jepson. I will call upon Dr. Rupak Parikh to ask Dr. Sunny Bhatia his question, and that is for 2 minutes.
Yes, absolutely. So, I think we've alluded this on this topic quite a few times. It's an important topic. We just had Mr. Jepson talk about it as well, which is telemedicine. It's a huge mechanism that we're using right now. Couple stats. I think we had a couple of our key speakers talk about it already. We had Mr. Dowling point out the positives for it, saying that there is acceleration and escalation of telemedicine, and it has increased access to care. And on the flip side, we'd had Dr. Kiran Patel talk about potential cons for it in terms of the human aspect of it, or the physician technical physical exam aspects being lacking by making this change. Startling facts: 1 billion virtual healthcare encounters are expected by the end of 2020, which is pretty staggering numbers. I guess the question we want to know here is, what is the role of telemedicine post-COVID? And I wanted to ask that question to Dr. Sunny Bhatia, please.
Yeah, thanks, Rupak. Telemedicine played a role pre-COVID, albeit probably more limited, with service lines, behavioral health, neurology, stroke. We were early adopters with telemed, implemented it in those service lines, as well as urgent care, ICU, cardiology, outpatient programs as well. It was an opportunity for us to provide needed services in geographical markets that had a lack of certain specialists, with lack of physician coverage. Now with COVID and the pandemic, it became very clear that telehealth and access to high quality telehealth would be necessary for physicians to treat patients remotely. The telemedicine platforms have seen a tremendous surge during the pandemic. Again, patients were reluctant to go to doctors' offices. Healthcare providers were pushing these video visits. Initially, they were resistant and reluctant, but they needed this type of modality to continue to deliver services. But thankfully, CMS responded appropriately. They boosted a reimbursement for telehealth visits, so they matched that of in-clinic visits, and also increased reimbursement rates for other remote visits, such as just simply telephonic visits. And then they also relaxed guidelines about the type of telehealth visits it would cover, making them accessible to nearly all beneficiaries and situations. Health systems quickly pivoted, along with many medical practices, to these virtual visits for primary care, non-emergent visits, as well as check-in visits for patients with chronic conditions and serious comorbidities. And then we saw private payers follow suit and update their coverage guidelines and rates throughout the summer. Now, the increased availability and coverage for telehealth visits have been crucial in the adoption by providers and patients. Many on both sides are becoming comfortable with this modality, and many in the industry predict that it's here to stay. Now, I would advocate not necessarily as a replacement to that face-to-face visit, which is so meaningful, between patients and providers, but as an adjunct, a supplement to what's already there. Again, many agencies and media outlets have reported, the volume of telehealth visits, it's climbing very quickly. And CMS Administrator Seema Verma simply said, the genie's out of the bottle on this one. It's pushed us to the new frontier. We're not going back. And if you have CMS advocating for telemedicine, it's going to be here to stay. And healthcare is typically slow to adopt technology, but I think because of the need and the pandemic here, it's been more embraced and I think adopted, and will become part of our armamentarium in taking care of patients going forward. With the loosening of these requirements, there's just many more platforms out there. We've brought in some free platforms. Doxy, Microsoft Teams has been mentioned. We've used Skype, WebEx, FaceTime. We've developed our own homegrown platform that's been implemented, integrating it into our EMR and conventional workflows, and ensuring that our front end and back end processes are optimized to capture the core elements of the visit, the proper documentation, coding, billing, adequate reimbursement. So We think it's here to stay, not necessarily as a replacement to our traditional way of taking care of patients, but this disruption in healthcare that we've seen now is now created a real opportunity going forward.
Thank you. Now we have Dr. Parikh. You have a question for Dr. Brady Dubois?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we have a lot of physicians here that are part of OPPI that not only work for the hospital, but also are independent practitioners. And it was alluded to before, and I think it's a key question in terms of the economics of medicine. So, you know, even before COVID, we had a noticeable increase in hospitals and private equity and managed care plans that were acquiring physician practices. And then you mix in the fact that you have, with these new regulations, there's a rise in autonomous practice for mid-levels. How do we think that this is going to impact independent practitioners moving forward post-COVID? What are the challenges? And again, how do we think it's going to impact private practice physicians?
Well, to start, I truly believe that for the independent practice physicians, they're having a really rough go of it right now. You know, they're trying to keep their workforce in place, trying to maintain some semblance of revenue coming in. But how I see the independent practices being impacted, or you're going to see a lot more desperation from the hospitals for good affiliation with the independent practices. The hospitals are going to want the independent practices to stay independent, especially for the foreseeable future, while the uncertainty of reimbursement is all there, because then the burden is with the independent practices. What a lot of organizations are seeing now is very, very large employed groups, the losses sustained by the clinic practices, those $150,000 a year to $300,000 a year subsidized losses are just not going to be able to be maintained going forward for a long term. Whereas with independent practices, can we build an affiliation for medical directorships, for call pay situations, working on service line agreements? And you're going to see that across the nation, more of an outreach by the hospitals to pursue independent practices to keep them independent, but more closely aligned with their hospital. The other piece that can't be understated enough is the fear in America is coming into the hospital. We need folks to get over that. If you have that message coming from an employed physician, or you have that message coming from an independent physician, there's two different types of tone to it. There's two different ways that it could be construed by the general public. So having a good affiliation with independent practices to help calm America, you know, as to it's safe to come into hospitals again, that's where I see a lot of the value of those great relationships that have been going on for years. But I do see challenges for both independent practices and employed practices. And, you know, what we've noticed is that the independent physicians are a little bit more nimble, and they're a little bit quicker to market with new technologies and new ways to reach their patients. And they also have more connection with their patients. So because they tend to have their patients for longer term, whereas in the employed setting, you see movement within the employed ranks a little bit more often, whereas in the independent side, you have that patient for decades. So I do think they're well positioned for the future.
Thank you, Dr. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective that you just voiced here. And of course, at least in the immediate future, the government aid has been a help for a lot of independent physicians. How long it will last, we don't know. I would request Dr. Kavita Bhatia now to ask her question to Dr. George Miller.
Great, thank you. I think we've just heard a little bit about the enormous financial struggles and strain that's being placed on providers during this pandemic. And we talked a little bit about how healthcare and its future may be shaped from this pandemic. And I think this next question really is about the impact of COVID on the movement to value-based care. So, you know, not only has COVID placed significant financial strain on systems and providers, it's also upended normal utilization and care patterns, disrupting providers' abilities to successfully deploy population health strategies and value-based care. Based on a recent survey of over 200 ACOs, 42% of those risk-based ACOs stated that they're likely to leave their programs, with 77% worried about the impact of COVID on their performance. CMS has provided regulatory relief in response to those concerns, including suspension of mandatory quality data reporting between January 1st and June 30th in calculations for quality and VBP programs, and delayed submission deadlines for merit-based incentive payment system and MSSP, so to not overburden providers on the front line. Others argue that COVID has emphasized the importance of value-based care, and that the pandemic highlights the weaknesses in a volume-based system, where a value-based approach more effectively allows providers to weather changes in volume, including downturns such as this crisis. So I think the question that we'd like to discuss is, will post-COVID accelerate or derail the movement to value-based care?
Well, I think that's an excellent question. It's one that we need to deal with. If I could take a moment to paint the landscape of value-based payments versus outcomes, particularly for minority communities. I'm in Chicago, Illinois. We serve a diverse minority population. In America, half of the deaths are people of color. Pretty close to 80,000, and half of them are people of color. And so that gives us great pause. In Chicago, we're 30% African Americans, and other minorities are 30% of the population, yet 72% of the deaths. So while I think that value-based payment makes the most sense, I served on MedPAC for 6 years, and we helped develop and talked about value-based payment to pay for value. But the underlying fundamental problem in America, quite frankly, for all people across the spectrum, especially people of color, the poor, the disenfranchised, there is a major difference. There's inequity and disparities in healthcare, and it's stark and real. What COVID-19 has done is shown a bright light on that inequity. Value-based payment should provide equal value to everyone who comes in the healthcare system. Frankly, it does not at this time. You cannot discuss value-based payment without talking about the inequities and disparities in healthcare. And they are stark, they're real, and quite frankly, with as rich as we are in America, it is an embarrassment that more than 50% of all the deaths are in just one minority group, and that's people of color. And we've got to change that. And I think this is an opportunity that all of us must raise our conscious voice of equity, fairness, and treating every human being with dignity and respect across the healthcare spectrum. Value-based payment has absolutely a wonderful value, but we have to get to the root of the underlying scourge in this country, and that's not treating people equally, justly, and fairly, especially in healthcare. Martin Luther King said, of all the injustice in the world, the injustice in healthcare is the most inhumane, and we got to change that. So we got to make sure both the federal government, state governments, and all that provide healthcare make sure that we deal with that inequity. Then value-based payment has more of a fundamental value for all of us.
Thank you, Dr. George Miller. We have two more questions. The first one is by Dr. Parikh, which will be to Ms. Dr. Mohan, and the second one will be to Dr. Kiran Patel. Dr. Parikh, please go ahead.
Sure. So, the question, I think a lot of us have seen the news lately. This is a positive note to discuss. We've seen news, we've seen Facebook messages, we've had flybys in terms of a positive response for physicians, various acts to show, for the general public, to show physicians and healthcare workers that they show appreciation for us. In India, there's been many instances where you actually have the public beating or cursing physicians. And so in this situation over here in this country right now, we've seen such positive acts in terms of support for the physicians. I guess the question we want to discuss here is, do we think that this public esteem of physicians is going to stay and as physicians as first responders?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That is actually a great question. And until COVID hit, I do not think physicians had the kind of esteem that we have now. And now it is up to us whether we want to increase it, maintain it, or lose it. So it depends on how we approach our communities, our patients, how we self-modulate our behaviors. And I've unfortunately, skepticism and fear and valid, absolutely, because obviously this is new to us. And I'm always an optimist. I try to see opportunities and good things in life with all this stuff and difficult situations. We've had multiple parades outside our hospital from the local community, from the local police, from the firemen. I'm sure other hospitals have also had that. We had a great event, which is actually on YouTube right now, which was just outside our hospital at Monmouth Southern Campus at Lakewood, New Jersey. Like I mentioned earlier, we have a strong Orthodox population and a lot of retirement communities, which, as you all know, they're very high risk for COVID, and they were locked down pretty much during the past couple of months or so. So we have made some strong bonds with the community, and one of the shining examples is the convalescent plasma that we did. At Monmouth Medical Center Southern Campus, we actually got into the Mayo Clinic very, very early on, and we had registered our hospital at the New York Blood Center. There was an outpouring of folks from the local community, which was led by Beaker Colum in the local community, which actually went in and got themselves screened and donated. And we are probably one of the largest convalescent plasma places in the country, and only probably second or third to some of the places in New York. And we are early adapters to the convalescent plasma. Previously, it was only when patients were late. We actually started giving them early, and although the trial was out, and it would be presumptuous for me to say anything about that, but obviously, early treatment, as we've seen in most modalities for COVID, actually helped us. The respect, I've heard about telemedicine as well, and one of the presenters were negative about it, and the fear is obviously that it's going to be not used appropriately, and then again we can lose our reputations because of that. And the other aspect of it is whether we are late adapters. For some reason, physicians have always been underestimated, whether it is businessmen or late adapters to technology. As an interventional cardiologist, we've had pacemakers, defibrillators, all sorts of late technology in the 70s and 80s, and also as far as electronic health records, which is used as a medium to show us that we are late adapters to technology. I think we are early adapters to technology, and we are very technological savvy. So we've used telemedicine in our place for stroke, for tele-ICU, for telepsychiatry, but again, it has to be used smartly. Like I keep on saying initially, we have to think out of the box. It cannot be one fits all. We're not a socialist country. We should not be a socialist country. It's a free country, free capitalism. And that's how it should be. We have tele-ICU as well as a closed ICU model. And we've seen that both of those things are obviously not the same. But there is a place for tele-ICU. There is a place for tele-stroke. There is a place for telepsychiatry. There is a place for tele-outpatient. And some of our physicians over here have already started doing that in their private offices. So I think we have to look at it in a positive aspect and how we can bond with our patients, do the right thing for the patients, do the right thing for the community, and not just get hung up on how the modalities of payments will be. Of course, we need to lobby our congressmen, educate them about what good work we are doing, get our communities to support us to educate congressmen and the local leaders to make sure what good work they're doing so that they know, so that we have a strong lobby. You cannot have a stronger lobby than your own community. You can pay lawyers and go and lobby, but if your community folks lobby your local congressman, that is the strongest lobby you will have. So I think it is, to answer your question directly, it's in our hands. Whether the reputation of the physicians is going to increase, decrease, stay the same, it's in our hands. How we take it from here. This is a golden opportunity, I believe, for us, where we've been raised up as heroes now in the eyes of others, and whether we should continue to stay like that or dip down again.
Thank you. This is Dr. Suresh Reddy. I would like to introduce another panelist, Dr. Jay Butt. He's a good friend of mine. He's a practicing physician from Chicago, and he was the past Chief Medical Officer of City of Chicago and Chief Medical Officer of American Hospital Association. Dr. Jay Butt.
Thank you, Dr. Reddy. Appreciate your leadership. It's an honor to be with all of you. And thanks to API for all the great work that you're doing. And one of the things that I feel really grateful about is the incredible work that our colleagues are doing on the front lines, and to shape policy and to lift up stories like you all have tonight about how there is opportunity to make a difference and envision a different kind of healthcare system for the future. And so I think there's a lot to be said about COVID in a number of different respects. And then there are some that say that this is over exaggerated, that this has been made too much. And those of us that have been involved know that there are a number of challenges, but one of the things that I think about is what will we turn back the clock on and what will we not? Because there's a lot that we've done in the time of COVID that could have been done before COVID. But it took this pandemic to bring us to these changes, regulatory relief, and other issues. But again, there are many that think on both sides of the issue. And so I'd like to ask Dr. Kiran Patel, what's your view on where COVID is? Is it appropriate? Is COVID been exaggerated? Is it this pandemic that we're making such a big deal out of to uproot lives? And that's certainly causing challenges for people, both in the healthcare system and those in our communities and our neighbors. So Dr. Patel, would love your perspective.
Thank you, Jay. I'm going to give you a contrarian view. I honestly believe that in today's environment and the liberal media and the way the politics is, unfortunately, it has been a goal of media to scare the people and always look at the worst case scenarios and highlight that. Nobody is talking about the amount of progress we have made. So for example, recent speakers talk about a particular group being more, but if somebody takes a deeper dive and looks at the age group, the preconditions that they have, etc. So to the point to all the physicians I make, many of those population that we are talking about has a government safety net of Medicaid insurance coverage. If we are blaming the healthcare delivery system, then we as physicians will have to take a significant responsibility of not treating that population well. So all I am telling you is, I believe that one could take a view of thinking of the doomsday, and the politicians like to do that primarily because, God forbid, even if it's a 5% chance and that happens, then they will be slaughtered in the public eye. I believe nature, God, our own defense mechanism, herd immunity, etc., are a factor, and one should keep those type of things in mind. I am not telling that we have not to be careful. I am not telling we should not practice good precautions, but simply making it a doomsday scenario and painting everything to be bad and no solution. Now, naturally, a vaccine and treatment are two essential components, but the fact that we are still not fully aware of the reason of the mortality and some of these people, the clotting, was multiple organ failures, reasons for which. So there are so many unknown factors. And in that light, trying to just paint a very bad picture. Also, when you will compare Sweden versus other places, recently in New York, they say that lots of diseases are coming from patients that have been in home and never gone out. So there is a lot of things that one has to look into, and simply the scare tactics of certain groups, maybe for political reasons or otherwise, or their own beliefs, has to be, and this is where I keep bringing that API can objectively be taking leadership and creating a name. If we do a very objective, detailed analysis of some of these things, removing the personal biases, political biases, and others, to come up with a future that can be good. Telemedicine, I know there has been issues, but again, the abuse of all of these things, because simply now there is compensation. So as one of the speaker mentioned, quality practice first, let the money follow. I think if that principle is adopted by all of our physicians and look at this thing objectively, I believe honestly that they will find a solution that is on the middle of the road with lots of positive issues and learning a lot from here, but simply not opening up the country and living a lifestyle of this type is not something that I see happening. I mean, how can you have no more football, no more baseball, no theaters? I mean, it is virtually impossible to live in that type of environment. And I think that more quickly than what we expect, we will see an improvement. The vaccines are going to come much faster than what people think, and so will the treatment. So I hope and pray that what I'm betting on, that this is an exaggerated situation, will be proven right with time. Only time can tell whether it is exaggerated or not. So I will end there, telling that this is a good question, a lot to think about, a lot of unknowns. We are in an uncharted territory, and let's see what happens.
Thank you, Dr. Patel, and thanks for your contributions through your career and all that you've done. And I think, you know, you raised an important point that this is a time for opportunity to reflect on lessons learned, so that we know that when this continues in other waves, we'll be prepared to meet it, beat it, and be more effective in living our lives and delivering the kind of care that we hope we'll be able to, as we envision a new healthcare system, which I think will continue to progress. So, Chairman, back to Dr. Reddy.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. This is Ravi Jagdar. It's 1 minute before 10, and let me call upon our chairman of our board of trustees for this year, Dr. Seema Arora, to give the closing remarks. Seema.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Seema Arora, Chair Board of Trustees of API. I would like to thank everyone today for this excellent webinar. So some take-home points that I gathered were that there are a lot of unknowns, as we all know. It's not over yet, may come back, will change us forever. So we should take it as a learning experience. May it be telemedicine or technology or personal and cultural changes. So with that, I would like to thank all the panelists, all the speakers, all the moderators did an excellent job. And of course, all the audience, President Dr. Suresh Reddy, and our administrator, Dr. Ms. Vijaya Kodali. Please come back. Please keep attending our webinars every Wednesday and Saturday. So with that, I would like to say good night to everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you.
Good night and happy Mother's Day to all.
Happy Mother's Day.